Hi, welcome to Denver Museum of Nature and Science, Science Division Live program. My name is Dr. Paula Cushing. I am curator of invertebrate zoology at the Denver Museum. And I am by training an arachnologist. So my research focus is arachnids, spiders, and their relatives. And what I'm going to do today is talk to you about some of my favorite spiders, which are spiders that have evolved a close association with ants. Now, as long as my presentation works. So before I delve into this association between spiders and ants, you have to understand a little bit about the biology of both spiders and ants. So spiders, as those of you hopefully all know, are major arthropod or insect predators found worldwide. So the worldwide spider population is eating between 400 and 800 million tons of insect prey every year. So they're major predators of insects, but they don't particularly like to eat ants, nor do most other arthropod predators. So when I say arthropod or insect predators, I mean things like wasps and birds and lizards and other insect predators tend to avoid eating ants. Why is that? Well, it's because ants are like little chemical factories. So ants are filled with different kinds of chemical compounds, and they are communicating with each other largely through chemistry, through chemicals. Now, how many of you out there would willingly walk across an ant colony barefoot? I don't think very many of us would do that, because we know that if we walk across an ant colony, the ants are going to get all perturbed. They're all going to come out en masse, and some ant colonies can have thousands of individual ants in them. So if they get perturbed by something that is attacking or threatening their colony, you will get stung or bitten or sprayed with acid by not just one ant, but sometimes by hundreds of ants. So for arthropod predators like spiders, it just isn't worth it to even try to attack or eat an ant. So most arthropod insect predators avoid eating ants because they'll just attack you, and they don't taste very good. They're not particularly palatable. Yet there are a lot of spiders that have evolved close associations with ants, and that's what I'm going to talk about in today's lecture. There are three categories of these spider symbionts, spider-ant symbionts. There are Marmika-morphic spiders. These are spiders that have evolved close physical resemblance and sometimes behavioral resemblance to ants. There are Marmika-phages, which are spiders that, despite the unpalatability of ants, have evolved to specialize on eating ants. And then the third category is Marmikophiles, and these are spiders that actually live inside the ant colonies. I'm not going to be talking about the Marmikophiles today. So today I'm just going to talk about the Marmikomorphs and the Marmikophages. So Marmikomorphs, if we think about mimicking an ant's body, if you're a spider and you evolve mimetic resemblance to ants, what does that mean? Well, ants have three major body parts: head, thorax, and abdomen, whereas spiders only have two: the cephalothorax and the abdomen. Ants have three pairs of walking legs. They have 6 legs. Spiders have 8 legs. Ants have a pair of antennae. Spiders have no antennae. And oftentimes ants have a pair of very enlarged mandibles that are sticking out in front of the body, whereas spiders, their jaws are called chelicerae, and they're typically tucked underneath the body. And ants move in a very different fashion than spiders. They move in a very erratic fashion, whereas spiders' movement is completely different than ants. So in order to be a Marmikomorph, an ant mimic, a spider basically has to lose a pair of legs, gain a pair of antennae, gain a third body part, sometimes somehow gain a pair of these large mandibles, assume erratic behavior, totally different behavior. So how do they do that? Well, these spider Marmikomorphs oftentimes have much more slender bodies than non-Marmikomorphic spiders. Oftentimes they have a white band of setae on their abdomen that gives them the appearance of having 3 body parts. Sometimes they have constrictions on their cephalothorax or their abdomen, a pinching, of the cephalothorax or abdomen that gives them the appearance of having multiple body parts. They also tend to walk around in the environment holding their first pair of legs up in the air and waving them so that it looks like they're waving antennae. So they lose a pair of legs and gain a pair of antennae by lifting those front pair of legs up in the air. Sometimes some of these marmikomorphs also gain a pair of large mandibles. In this case, up in this slide, you can see a spider's has the chelicerae enlarged, the jaws, and it's holding its jaws straight up in front of the body. So it makes it look like it has a pair of very large mandibles. And there are marmikomorphic spiders found in 13 different families. So there are dozens and dozens of different species of spiders that have evolved this close physical resemblance to ants. In this video, I'm going to show you some of these adaptations that I just talked about. So in this video, you will see, first of all, you see that this ant mimicking spider has a constriction. It has a pinching of the abdomen and a white band that gives it the appearance of having 3 body parts. And as it was moving around, it was holding its front legs up in the air and waving them like antennae. So it looks like it has a pair of antennae. It looks like it only has 6 pairs of legs. So that's a really good illustration of this, of these mimetic resemblance and behavioral resemblance to ants. And sometimes this resemblance is extraordinary. So in this upper slide, the upper left slide, you can see here's the model ant and here's its spider mimic. The color pattern is the same, the body shape is the same. It's pretty extraordinarily close to close mimetic resemblance to the model ant. In this plate right here, the model ant is right here in the upper left. This is the mimetic spider that looks very similar morphologically and physically to the model. Here's another example. Here's the spider on the right and here's the ant on the left. In this plate, the spiders are in the middle and the ants are on the right. So it's pretty amazing. So why? Evolutionarily, what's the reason for this? Well, the very well supported at this point hypothesis is that these marmikomorphic spiders are Batesian mimics. They're not living inside the colony with the ants for the most part, but they are living in the general vicinity of the ants. And Batesian mimicry is a situation where a very palatable animal, like a spider, which is perfectly palatable and tasty to insect predators and to arthropod predators, this tasty arthropod, the spider, is mimicking something that lives in the same general habitat that is itself unpalatable and not very tasty. So the spider is mimicking the ant and gaining advantage from that mimicry against its own predators. There are lots and lots of papers that have been published that tested this hypothesis and that have supported the hypothesis that these marmikomorphic spiders are Batesian mimics. First of all, they're living in the same habitat as their model ants. They have very close physical resemblance to the ants. Arthropod predators that are tested and given a choice between the spider mimic and the ant and a non-mimic will readily eat the non-mimic, but will avoid preying upon or attacking the spider, the ant mimicking spider. So predators avoid eating these marmikomorphs. And when a predator does try to attack the marmikomorph, it drops its behavioral strategies and just runs away. So all of these are lines of evidence and lots of publications that have supported the hypothesis that these marmikomorphic spiders are Batesian mimics. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about these marmikophages. And marmikophages, again, are ant specialists. These are spiders that have evolved to prey oftentimes only upon ants. So they are no longer just eating any kind of insect they come upon. They're usually preying solely on ants. And so that's very unusual. And we find these marmikophages in 5 different families. The one that we know most about their biology is this family Zotoraidae, and in particular the genus Zotoraion. Zodorion is found here. For those of you who live in Colorado, we find species of Zodorion rubidum here in Colorado. And this is a picture of the species that lives locally. Zodorion rubidum is a very small little spider. It gets about 2 millimeters in size. It builds these little igloo-shaped retreats, silk-lined retreats made out of stones that it places underneath rocks. It lives inside this retreat and then comes out to hunt at night. And when it comes out to hunt, it hunts ants that are found in the vicinity of its retreat. And when it hunts, this is from a paper by Stano Pekar, a colleague who's done a lot of work with this species and this genus. The Zodorion emerges from its retreat. It sneaks up behind an ant, and then it bites the ant in a rear leg, in one of the rear legs. The venom takes effect almost immediately, and the ant, within a few seconds, within about 30 seconds, becomes completely paralyzed from the venom. Then the spider has retreated. After it bites, it retreats and waits for the paralysis to happen. And then once the ant is paralyzed, it reapproaches the ant, grabs it, usually behind the head, and carries it off. And what's cool about Zodorion is that when it carries it off, it uses the dead ant as a shield to protect itself against other live ants that might approach it. And we're going to see that behavior in this video, and once it starts moving. So you're going to see in this clip that I show, the spider has already bitten the rear leg of the ant. Once the video starts, Zoom doesn't like videos. So it's already bitten the rear leg, and you can see the ant is slowing down. Now the spider is reapproaching, and it grabs the ant, and it's carrying the ant off. And you're going to see another ant approaching the spider, and the spider will present the living ant with the dead ant. So it uses the dead ant as a shield against the approach of any living ant. How cool is that? I think that's amazing. So now I'm going to tell you about some new research that I've been working on a very interesting species of spider that has been collected and found only in the vicinity of ant nests. And this species of spider was first discovered by a graduate student of my colleague, Norm Horner, shown here examining one of the spiders. Norm Horner's graduate student, Greg Broussard, was doing some pitfall trapping to gather baseline information about arthropod and insect and spider diversity in the Chihuahuan Desert down in Texas. And the pitfall traps that Greg was using were cups that were filled with preservative. And he was pulling out any insects and spiders and anything else that fell into this preservative and identifying it and getting information on the arthropods that lived in this region of the Chihuahuan Desert. And Greg encountered in his cups that were placed only near ant colonies, he started finding this very strange, tiny little spider. This spider is less than 2 millimeters in size. And Norm could not identify what species this was. So Norm sent this spider to about 20 other arachnologists, including myself. And it took us years and years to figure out what this animal was. And in 2019, a colleague, Martin Ramirez, used DNA analysis to determine that this spider that was found only in the vicinity of ant nests represents not only a new species, but a new family of spiders. So very unusual. So Norm Horner and I were part of this research. And after this came out, Norm and I wanted to determine more about the biology of this spider. What we hypothesized is that maybe it was living inside the ant colonies like a Marmika file, not feeding on the ants, but maybe just taking advantage of the protection of the ants, because it was only found in the vicinity of the ant colonies. And it has been collected in these wet pitfall traps from June through November. So Norm and I and another colleague of Norm's, Jesse Rogers, revisited the Chihuahuan Desert area of Texas, and we used dry pitfall sampling where we used dry solo cups that had no preservative in them. and they had a little funnel, another cup placed inside it. And these cups were covered with a rock, so you can see the cup is under here. We placed these cups around ant nests where Norm had previously found these spiders. And then we revisited these traps every day, hoping that we would find live spiders in the cups. And we did. We put those live females into a little Pyrex container, and we placed a little piece of wood for the spiders to hide under. And then we added to that container those 2 spiders and ants from the same colony. And one thing we noticed was that the spiders built these really interesting little retreats underneath the wood, little circles of tiny stones, very similar to the stony retreats that I showed you from the Zodorion spiders. And the spiders, our spiders, the Marmika culturity spiders, stayed in their retreats until nightfall. Then they emerged and came out into the Pyrex container. And lo and behold, what do? But they sneak up behind the ants, bite the ant in the rear leg, retreat, reapproach, grab the ant behind its head, carry it off, and use it like a shield. They repositioned their body if another ant approached, so that the live ant was encountering the dead ant. Very, very similar behavior to the Marmika phages behavior that I described for Zodorion. So this is brand new research that we just are trying to get published. So this is a paper in press. So why? Here's the big evolutionary why question. What is the adaptive significance of Marmika phagy? Well, I already told you that ants are unpalatable and noxious to most arthropod predators. So most predators avoid eating ants. If you, as a Marmika phage, evolve adaptations that allow you to eat ants, you don't have any competitors for your food source. And if you live in the vicinity of an ant nest, as I said, some ant nests have thousands of ants in them. You have an endless supply of food. And if you live near your host ants, close enough to them, or maybe in the colony with them, you are protected against your own predators by your prey. So how interesting is that? It's a fascinating system. So with that, I'm going to end the presentation and ask Memory to throw out any questions that you may have for me.
Hi, Paula, and hello, everybody watching Science Division Live with us. I'm just popping in like I always do to read your questions to our presenter, Dr. Paula Cushing, today. Last time I looked, we did not have any just yet. However, I am monitoring Facebook and YouTube. So if you think of anything, feel free to drop that question in there and I will get that to Paula for us to get an answer.
And fair enough to ask me any spider question. It doesn't have to be on the lecture.
Nice. Good to know. Good to know. Awesome. So how about I start with asking you a question while we see if we get any spider questions in. So what attracted you to this research? I mean, what interesting research with, really defining a new species of spider? What struck your curiosity with getting on with that research?
So this fascination with this spider-ant associations really started when I was an undergraduate in college. And I was, the very first time I met with a biology instructor who I wanted to volunteer with, he happened to be an arachnologist, and I was just talking, it was just a conversation where I was chatting with him about spiders and about his research. His name is Brent Opel. And in the course of that conversation, he mentioned that there had been documented cases of spiders that lived inside ant colonies. And I was amazed, and I said, well, because I knew enough about ants to know that that was really unusual. And I said, well, how do they do that, and why do they do that? Like, how do they get past that defensive barrier of the ants? And Brent said, we don't know. And I thought, man, that is a powerful answer.
Yeah.
And remember that we don't know. And that's what I pursued for my PhD, is I found a system where I could study these Marmika phylix spiders and figure out how they bypass the defensive barrier of the ants, how they got in the colonies, why they got in there. And then I just expanded my interest from there. So all through the years, I've had an interest and kept up with the literature on these spider ant associations. But that's how it started. It started with somebody saying, we don't know.
That's, I mean, what an amazing way to start, you know, with a problem or a question that we don't have an answer to.
Yep.
Fantastic. Oh, we have one question rolling in from Debbie, who asks, when spiders catch prey that is larger than they are, it seems like it's more than one meal. Do they stop when full and go back to it later? That's good.
Yes, that's a great question. Sometimes they do. So they'll feed, sometimes they just feed for a really long period of time. So they'll kill the prey and then they'll just feed and feed and feed for hours and suck up all those nutrients. But yeah, sometimes they'll wrap the prey, feed for a while, and then revisit the prey later. But that leads to another interesting factoid, which is spiders can go a really long time without feeding, without eating, not so long without water, but very long without feeding, because their digestive system is so efficient. And because, as Debbie pointed out, sometimes their prey are so large, they're getting lots of nutrients just with one insect.
Interesting, interesting. That was a great question. About how long, just I'm curious, do ants go without eating?
Do the spiders go without eating?
Sorry, yes, spiders go without eating, yeah.
So I have a tarantula at my house because I had to bring it home. I had to bring it home because of COVID. It was in my office, and it has not eaten the entire year.
Wow.
And I don't know why. Sometimes when they're getting ready to molt, they stop feeding for a while. So I'm thinking that either she's getting ready to die or getting ready to molt. But so that's at least 12 months that she's gone without feeding.
Wow, interesting, interesting. Okay, we have another question from Dan on YouTube, who asks, do ant colonies ever develop awareness of these spider predators? And do they develop any defense?
That is such a good question. And we don't know the answer. So one of the things that we did with this new Marmika Phagy system that we're studying is we pulled in a chemical ecologist, and we are comparing the chemistry of the spider's hydrocarbon signature with the ant's hydrocarbon signature. So one of the ways that ants can tell a colony member from a non-colony member is basically by smelling the chemical signature of the exoskeleton. And some of these spiders that are living near the ant colonies have evolved either a way to absorb the host colony odor, or adaptations that allow them to produce chemical signals that mimic the ant colony. So it's a great question. And we think that with these Marmika phages, the ants may not be able to tell that it is a predator or some risk, either because the spider is innocuous and they just can't, it's so tiny they don't notice it there, or because the spider has evolved a chemical signature that is similar to the ant. Very good question. We don't really know the answer to that yet.
Interesting. Oh, we have another YouTube question from P. James Wallace, who asks, is the behavior convergent evolution or common descent?
I'm not sure if he means if PJ means the ants and the spiders convergent, which is, that's probably not likely, or if he means convergence or homologous evolution with these different species of Marmika. So I'm not quite sure what he means there. It's probably I don't know. I don't know if the Marmika phages, the Marmika phage that we have here, the Zodorion that we have here in Colorado, is actually a European species that evolved to eat European ants, but it will readily eat American ants. And so in that case, it doesn't care if that answers that question, but I'm not quite sure what he's asking.
And I am not seeing any more questions. If you do have any more questions, feel free to still drop them in our comments. I'm happy to send them to Dr. Cushing so we can get you an answer. But until then, how about I ask you our Okay. So we have a response from P. James. He says, is it common descent from the ant mimic family you first described? So he's referring to that.
Oh,
Mhm.
I still don't understand the question. So usually when you're talking about convergence, I think he means that is it convergent, is the mimicry convergent between the model and the ant? And that's a great question. And probably for some of them it is. So what we think is that it's not convergent, it's they evolved with the model. So if it's a very close mimetic resemblance, then the spider may have evolved in the vicinity of the same species and over time evolved this very, very tight mimetic resemblance. So in that case, there was parallel evolution of the model and the mimic. But for some of the morphological mimics, the Marmika morphs, the mimicry is not as close behaviorally or morphologically. So it kind of generally looks like an ant, but it doesn't look like a particular species of ant. So in that case, it probably is not a parallel evolution with the model. I think that's what he meant.
Okay, awesome. Oh, and how about we let this a question from Facebook be our final question from Sue Knight, who asked, this is a Black Widow question. Are there female widows that do not have red hourglass? I had one that was unmistakably a Black widow, but didn't have the red mark. Thanks.
Me too. In fact, I have one in my kitchen.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I have a live Black widow in a jar that someone gave me because it lacks the red hourglass. So yeah, you can see some divergence, some different morphological variation in that red marking. And I have seen a few times there are Black widows that are definitely Black widows that lack that red marking. So it's not very common, but yeah, you do see it once in a while.
Interesting. I didn't know that either. So what a great factoid to end on. Any final words for our audience, Paula, as we go into our weekends with our new science spider knowledge?
I just hope that the audience appreciates the diversity of life on Earth and that we still have so much left to discover.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you all for watching us on Facebook and YouTube. We'll be right back here next week, Thursday at 12 for more Science Division Live. Please join us. Have a good one.
Bye.